All right, welcome everyone. Just gonna give folks a few minutes to join.
While you're coming in, if you want to put in the chat, tell us where you're coming from. Tell us something about yourself. New York City.
Wow, quite a list.
Louisiana, yeah, good luck. I hope weather doesn't hit you too bad. Rochester, New York, that's where I'm from.
We have some folks from our neighborhood over here in Virginia. Very nice. Welcome.
Charlottesville and Stanton.
We saw Richmond and Woodbridge as well.
Oh my goodness, this is going so fast.
Oh, look at you. Look at all you guys. It's great. Lots of Michigan folks. Welcome. Ooh, hello, Alaska. Hello, Tennessee. Very exciting.
It's early for some of you guys. Thank you for coming.
Definitely.
All right, well, let's give it maybe one more minute and then we'll get started. We have a lot to talk about today. All right, it looks like people are still coming in. And so if you are still coming in, feel free to chat find the chat box and tell us where you're coming from. It looks like we have just about someone from everywhere joining us. But
we have somebody here also from Puerto Rico, so welcome.
I think I've seen a couple of them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, we are going to take some time today to really just have a conversation that we hope you're part of, and assume it's sort of an ongoing conversation. We're all still learning and also figuring out what school looks like in the fall or now. And today we're going to really have it be a focus on supporting those high quality, meaningful interactions, specifically in virtual or hybrid classrooms. So our hosts will be Becky and Marnetta. I'm going to just take a moment. I'm Liz Savage. I'm the community manager here at TeachStone, and we'll really just take a moment to go through some background and learn a little bit about you, and then I'll hand it over to our experts. So just a few things. If you haven't found the chat box yet, we'll be reading that, and so if you have any questions, you can put them in there. We'll try and save some time at the end where you can ask our experts questions, and so you can use that. You'll see there's also a Q&A box, and so when we get to the Q&A at the end, you can put your questions there and they'll stay highlighted. Other things that are sort of common questions, this is being recorded. The recording will be shared out. We know that you might have colleagues you would like to share it with, or that you might not be able to stay through the whole thing. We'll also email out with that lots of resources that we mention in this, and other resources we think that might be helpful as you dive into your year. And there will also be a certificate of attendance on that page that we send out. And so all of the things that you might need afterward, we'll send via email by tomorrow afternoon. All right. So just quickly, if you're newer to TeachStone, I just wanted to share a little bit about us. We are an education company. We're in Charlottesville, Virginia, as it looks like a few of you are as well. And our goal is really to help every child reach their full potential. And we know that that can be done by improving interactions, classroom interactions. And that might be harder this year, but it's still our goal. And TeachStone is known as the publishers of class. And so before we move forward, just take a moment. We're going to put up a poll and share with us how familiar you are with class. So do you really not know much about class at all? Are you familiar but don't use it? Do you use it to collect data in your program, or do you use it to collect data and offer professional development? Right now we have almost 70% saying they use class for professional development and assessment, which is great. In the chat, Julia says she's used it for over 8 years now. That's impressive. Close to 10% don't know a lot about class. That's great. We're gonna do some overview, but also really the conversation will be really accessible to any level of knowledge about class. And it looks like the poll closed now. We're at about 70% that really use it for both assessment and professional development, which is great. All right. So for those of you who are newer, what is class? It stands for the Classroom Assessment Scoring System, and it's a measure for improving teaching quality. I was just having a conversation yesterday with someone who had never heard of class or TeachStone, but his mom was a teacher, and he was like, oh, well, yeah, that's just common knowledge. Like, of course, good teaching is just good interactions. Like, that's what everybody knows. I was like, exactly, you got it. And so we are looking at a way to measure and hopefully improve those effective teacher-child interactions. And if you have some time on your hands and want to dive into research, there is over 200 research studies, many of them on our website if you want to really look at the research on it. So brings us to now. We know that interactions at the core of great teaching. What teaching looks like might look a lot different in the next few months, hopefully not for too long. You know, I come at this as both had been a teacher, both from pre-K to 4th grade, and now as a parent of young children who are doing an interesting combination of sort of hybrid learning. And so I'm excited to also learn from Becky. But tell us a little bit about you. What is your role? Are you joining us today as a teacher, as a coach, as an administrator, as an observer? We're going to put another poll up if you can. Tell us. Oh, that's the wrong poll. There we go. Nope. What is your role? There we go. Oh, an interesting mix. Wonderful. Lots of teachers here today. Thank you, teachers. Lots of coaches. Close to 10% administrators, 15% are observers. And if you're one of the 7% that said other, feel free to put that in the chat. I know we can't, possibly make a poll that sort of encompasses all of your roles. Infant toddler specialist, great. Teacher assistant, curious coordinator. All right. Looks like over 40% of you are teachers. So that's wonderful. Thank you for joining us and for being interested in how to maintain quality interactions during this time. So another quick check-in, just in general, how are you doing today? I think this is one of those questions that I feel like we're so used to asking. It's just like, how are you? That feels like it's become a much trickier question to answer. But if you're a 5, you're doing great, you're feeling really positive about this year, to a 1, not so good. Please let us know. No, you guys are mostly doing really well today. I'm glad to hear it. We're at 3/4. I like that answer. I never can commit to one number. I'm always like a 3.5, 4.2. All right, looks like the majority of you are at a 4, but really almost everyone between a 3 and a 5. That's wonderful. And for those of you who are the 5% that are really more of a 1 or a 2, hopefully some of the stress you might have about this school year we can help you with in this conversation. All right, the other question, if you can just sort of put it in the chat box if none of these really fit your answer, or pick one of really the more common concerns. What are your concerns with teaching in a virtual classroom? It might be all of the above and then some, but where's maybe your biggest concern? We've got a good mix, about 25% keeping students engaged, 25% assessments and observations, 25% connecting with students. Stephanie wrote, supporting children's social and emotional well-being and fostering relationships with peers, for sure. Some parts of teaching feel a lot harder over Zoom.
Liz, I also saw in there, Holly mentioned the stress on the children.
Yeah. All right. Well, a pretty even mix, but for sure, effectively connecting with students was high up there. And hopefully that is one that we can really dive into today. So in our conversation today, we'll have Becky and Marnetta joining us. I'm gonna start the conversation with Becky, and about halfway through, Marnetta will take over and really dive into more strategies and specifics that you can hopefully take back to your classroom as soon as that might be. So some of the topics we're gonna try to cover, but they'll probably go beyond this, is some of the things that you were putting in the chat box, really. Challenges around how we interact in a virtual setting versus a classroom, and what high quality virtual interactions might look like. And then solutions and resources that we at TeachStone can hopefully offer you to support those virtual interactions. So Becky.
Yeah.
Can you take a second first and tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your background as a teacher?
Sure. So I started out actually way back in the day as a middle school special ed teacher. And I realized that early intervention was best, and that brought me into the pre-K world. While I was working in birth to 5, I was an infant and toddler specialist. I know I saw that in the welcome, that there are some special infant and toddler specialists in the group today. I also worked with our local Virginia QRIS program as a mentor and rater or assessor. And that's one of the places where I started using class. Before that, I was a pre-K teacher. I taught 4-year-olds for 6 years, actually 2 to 6-year-olds, not just 4s. I had the mixed age grouping at the end of the day. So I got our little ones and our big ones all together. And that, when I was a pre-K teacher, that's where I was first introduced to class. I was working with a mentor who was using class in our program for PD, as well as for our participation in the QRIS. So I've gotten to see the class tool from multiple perspectives as a classroom teacher, as an observer and coach, and now as a trainer on many of the age levels. So one thing that I thought was really important to recognize is that although our settings have changed, what kids need is really familiar and really, we know this stuff, right? We know that regardless of the setting, children still need warm, supportive relationships with their teachers and with their peers. They still need enjoyment of and excitement about learning. And I would argue that perhaps they need these things even more. We still need to think about their motivation to engage in learning activities, whether we're face-to-face, virtual, or in a socially distant setting, or in a combination of those. Feelings of comfort are still so important, especially when you think about, as somebody chatted into the chat box, the increased stress on children and on families. And we know that with those feelings of comfort come that willingness to accept those cognitive and social challenges that are still important for kids. And we still need to look for ways to give them autonomy. They are, even though we might be with them for shorter amounts of time, they're not with us for that 6 to 8 hours or longer. It might be 20 minutes or 30 minutes. We still need to actively find ways to give them that autonomy, because these are developmental needs. These aren't things that change with the setting. So I wanted to just have a conversation with Liz right now about that kind of maybe different expectations that a parent might have, or a school might have, or a teacher or an admin. So let's just take a minute and talk about that from those different roles.
And I think like even taking a step and just acknowledging that it's going to be hard for everyone. Like, this is going to be a harder year for teachers. It's going to be a harder year for students. It's going to be a harder year for parents. It's going to be a harder year for extended families, for school leaders. I think it's like just giving ourselves in any of those roles like grace that where everybody's doing the best they can, and relying on that, like, we're resilient people. Kids are super resilient, and we'll make it through this together. So it's interesting as a parent, trying to really think of like, what are my goals for my child, really breaking it down of, it used to be that part of, it was childcare so I could work. And now, what's the most important thing that a teacher can offer in that small amount of time that they really have them now? And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. Of, like you said, if you only have now 20 or 30 minutes, like, what's the most important piece?
So when I was a pre-K teacher, I really thought hard about this with my group times, my circle time. And I thought to myself, why am I having all the kids come together? Am I having them all come together so we can all learn this one discrete skill? Is that the best way to teach it? But what I really came to decide is the reason why we all came together in circle time was to be together and to build community. So those, teaching a specific skill wasn't necessarily my intent with circle time. I could teach those skills during small group, during free play, during gross motor play, right? By embedding them and using that language. So I kind of redefined my circle times, and I made them all about community. And so I think, like, now, if I had only 20 minutes a day with a group of kids and I had to think about how am I going to use this time most effectively, I'd really want to think about what, at the end of the day or at the end of the 20 minutes, what feelings do I want them to come away with? But I know that that doesn't necessarily align with what parents' expectations of that are. So from that parent perspective, what are some things that you like, some things that you want out of your child's engagement in these? So first of all, quick question: how old are your kids?
Yeah, so maybe a little older than our average audience. So my son just turned 5, and my daughter is 7.
Okay.
And so slightly older. And we did do virtual learning in March last year, like many. And I think, my sort of short answer to your really big question of like, what do parents, what are the expectations? I think, I've always just wanted, not just, but I've always wanted my children to like school and to like learning and to like the experience, because I think if similar to liking how to read, once you love it, once you fall in love with reading, then there's a smaller battle to like get your child to read or to read as an adult. And so, I think of all of the things my children's teachers did in person to have them like school and like the experience of learning and be curious and be creative. And that's a big ask over Zoom. But I do think there are ways that you can keep the child feeling engaged and feeling part of the school and feeling like school is still important. My teacher still cares about me. They still care if I am successful and if I learn and if I work hard. And I think sharing that level of like, you're still important is something I really appreciated in what my children's teachers were able to accomplish in the spring.
One thing I was just noticing in the chat box is that Erica is pointing out that a lot of the teachers that she interacts with have been creating and building better relationships with parents because there's more time for contact with parents. And I was just wondering, would that be a beneficial conversation to have with your child's teacher? Like, what are her goals? What are your goals? What is the school's goals? Where's the overlap? Where isn't there an overlap?
Yeah, one of the things my daughter's school is doing is before school starts, they're having a one-on-one in-person meeting, even though the rest of the, at least for now, school will be virtual, to have exactly that conversation. And I think it's such an important conversation to have, because certainly every family's needs and goals are different. I think of families where their main needs and goals are, they used to get breakfast and lunch and snack at school, and our needs now are that. Or, our main needs are, we have one computer and 5 kids. How do you want all 5 of them to do virtual learning? My daughter, has her own specific needs, and, I can tell the teacher sort of, what's going to work to get her to engage on Zoom. She responds very positively to positive reinforcement. She just wants her teacher to tell her, like, I love you and you did a good job. And like, after that, she'll do anything for you.
Yeah.
And so having that conversation of what's going to work over this time period, I think is meaningful, and really knowing what each family needs, because every single family will be different, especially with work schedules and how many children are in the home and what's your internet like.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm noticing in the chat box is that there's a lot of discussion going on right now about parents perhaps not having the same set of expectations as the teacher does, or perhaps not not viewing it the same as face-to-face school at that same level of importance. So I think that that those are some conversations definitely that I think teachers, admin, and parents would benefit from figuring out where that overlap is, and how teachers can best meet those needs as well as parents can meet those needs and support. And I love that idea, Liz, of what your school is doing where they're arranging a socially distant face-to-face meeting before one-on-one. That I think that that's a really responsible and respectful way of meeting that need right there.
Yeah, and I think they're have that opportunity then to also inform the parents. I think so much of this is going to be modeling for parents. Like, yeah, I don't know how to teach a 5-year-old as well as I could, their teacher does. Like, what should I be doing to support this at home? And I think the parents are also going to need to learn how to be that facilitator.
I also, one last thing just to add on to that, I also think it's important for the teachers and the parents to get on, like to talk to one another about those behavioral expectations. I know I did a very tiny little circle time with a couple of kids here virtually through Zoom, and I didn't have any expectations of the children to be sitting in front of the computer. I was fine with them moving around their rooms, but the parents were concerned, like, oh, you need to sit down, when I didn't need them to sit down. And so had I had that conversation ahead of time, I think it would have been great for parents to know, like, I don't mind if your kid goes over and sits on his bed and hugs his shark pillow during the story time. I don't mind if he sits on the floor and colors rather than sitting up at his desk. But having that conversation and letting parents know that ahead of time so that they're not, oh no, I have to make sure my child looks a certain way because it's school time now. Now, of course, if you do have certain expectations like that, then you do need to also have that conversation with parents both ways.
Yeah. I'm going to share in the chat just because I do know that many of our attendees are class observers and might have specific questions about what observations might look like of these virtual settings, but I'm also going to let you chat with Marnetta and really dive much more into some strategies, since it looks like close to 50% of our attendees really are teachers. I think having the two of you share, all right, now we know it's a challenge. We know it's a challenge for everyone. What can it look like and what strategies can we share? So I'm going to turn my camera off and share in the chat the observer information and let you talk teacher talk.
Awesome. Awesome. Hi, Marnetta.
Hello, Becky. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you? I'm
great. Great. Just moving, right?
That's right.
Nice and busy in these times.
Yeah. So you and I were going to have a little conversation about some strategies that teachers can use. Liz and I talked about that parent perspective. We also talked about why, or the fact that interactions still matter. In fact, they matter more now, perhaps, than before. So let's go ahead and talk about some things.
Sounds good.
So, first of all, do you want to take just a quick minute and share with the group what you've been doing this
today?
Just real quick, just give us a little perspective.
So I, have been spending my day teaching children virtually, basically. We really want to be a resource to you guys. And so, I met with a group of children that I literally just met today to try to show, some examples of what those interactions can look like. Had a lot of fun. The last session was really a lot of fun. So I look forward to being able to share that out with everyone and hopefully, give some really solid examples of what you guys can do in the classroom and still connect with children at a high level.
So one thing, Marnetta, when you and I were talking about this the other day, one of the things that you said, like one of your strategies that you were thinking about, which I just thought was, it reaches so many aspects of class, was starting your sessions with social conversations. And as soon as we were talking about that, it made me think not only how that's going to build relationships, but how that can also lead to some, language development and,
Yes. I love that you said that, because I think my first strategy, like the first thing I would tell teachers, is to be flexible and not to be so hard on yourself, right? Because I planned out this first session and it did not go as I wanted it to go, but it went perfectly, exactly how it should go, right? So, so I didn't even get to the meat and the nuggets of what I wanted to do. But that session, that 30-minute session, was really just about like the relationship piece, right? The children wanted to share and I was getting to know them, right? And it really informed what I did moving forward. So that first piece was really just about getting to know each other, them sharing, learning about their families, and creating that bond and that trust and that relationship with them. So I really just had to put what I wanted to do on the side and really dig deep into getting to know them. So if I want to build their brain and their cognition and their experiences and their skills and whatever, I really have to have that foundation first. So it wasn't what I planned, but it is exactly what they needed.
So that's something that, honestly, in my experiences as a preschool teacher face-to-face, I'm sure you had these too. Isn't that kind of how it always works?
It's how it's supposed to work. Yeah.
You go in with this great plan and then you don't necessarily follow it to the plan to fidelity.
So there are some questions in the chat. Somebody asked if the first session was recorded. Yes, it was. How that's going to go out, I do not know yet. As far as how long the session was, it was 30 minutes, which was plenty enough time for them. But of course, depending on your group, our job, if we think about class and teacher sensitivity, right, is being aware of those cues and when we might want to, shift that around. The children that I worked with, yeah, so lots of wonderful questions in the chat. It's just blowing up. It was a varied age group, so it was like 3 to 6 years of age in the classroom. Some parents were present and some were not. So it was a mix of that. Yes, so just to answer those questions, because I love that they're all filling out. And I think that's what I liked about it. I liked the mixed age group because I like a challenge, first of all. And I just want to be able to support you guys. So if you guys can look at that and see, hey, right, it's not going to be that hard. I can do this or whatever. That's what my goal was.
One thing that you mentioned, Marnetta, was reading the kids' cues. And so that was another strategy that we talked about, is that it really intentionally scanning those, the Zoom screen and trying to pick up on any nonverbal cues, or in some cases, clearly verbal cues. Was there anything that stood out, or anything that were there any cues that were unique to Zoom, or do you think that a lot of those cues are similar to what you remember from in the classroom?
Oh my goodness, that is such a great question. So yes, a lot of the cues were similar. The space is different, but you still have children filling in chairs, right? Except now their chairs turn around because they're using their mom's chair, right? So they're turning around in circles. Mm-hmm. They're getting out of their chairs, and because they're at home, they're comfortable, right, in their environment. So you still have those things. But I think, like you guys were talking about, setting those boundaries, when I walked in on, you and Liz talking about those expectations and those boundaries of what's expected, really helped. So in the first session, I was getting to know them and stuff, and then I was able to pick out. I'm like, okay, I'm going to need to talk to this child, right? I'm going to need this set of expectations, and make sure that it's really implicit in this next session, which is what I did. And that minimized that behavior that second time. So, just heads down, the move around. So not anything brand new yet, but definitely familiar cues.
Okay. A lot of folks are chatting in the chat box like, ooh, we can't wait to see the video and whatnot. And so just so that all of you can take a breath and not worry. You will get to see it at some point. Liz and Winston will share in the chat box or at the end the different resources and trainings we have coming out that are going to highlight this video. So stay tuned. I'm sure you'll get the details. No worries.
There is one thing I want to address from the chat. Somebody asked me about muting the other children and anything that I would have changed. So with that being said, those were that from my first session, that's what I changed for the second session, right? Was the ability to be able to mute some children, because we still had parents in the background doing stuff and it muddled some of the conversation. And then you have some children, you know, who are far more enthusiastic than other children, and they're still learning how to not, you know. So I think one of the challenges is virtually with the lack and stuff, talking over each other without knowing they're talking over each other. So I would just intentionally say, okay, Millie, hold on just a moment. I'm going to mute you because, you know, this child is still talking, right? And just letting them know. And then she was able to wait and then come back when it was her turn. So that was the only adjustment I made for the second session.
So one thing I know that, again, some comments in the chat box, but also just generally, this concern about that developmental readiness of kids to be and conceptualize and understand a virtual meeting. And I think with that 3 to 6 year old, you have such a huge developmental ability for the abstract at that point. And so I think one thing, this meeting is certainly not something we can go into a big developmental brain development conversation there. But I think that idea of reading the children's cues and acknowledging them and recognizing, wait, this child is not aware that they're in a whole group. They think it's just a one-on-one thing with their teacher right now. Because developmentally, they're not able to conceptualize the idea of that many other people in that one meeting. So I think that that's also something, as maybe, you know, Liz was talking earlier about being kind to yourself as a teacher. And I think that maybe that's part of it too, is recognizing that developmentally, there's a big difference between a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old. As far as the way they're going to understand a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Like, I think one of those strategies might be, you know, that I did was, you know, making sure everybody was on gallery view and having them point out their friends and identify their friends, right? And talk with their friends was one of the things that we did. So I was just like, does everybody see this child? If you see that child, like wave and tell them hi, right?
Oh, I love that, Marnetta.
So that was one of the things. So they understood we were a community and they weren't by themselves and they could see everyone.
That's so cool. I love that. So it sounds like you also were making connections to their home lives and pointing out things that other kids could see to help them to see the group, right?
Yes. Yes. So when they, like, we also did a little show and tell, and right, does everybody see what she's holding up? Right? Okay, they see you. Like, let's listen to why that's her, you know, toy of choice. So tried to build a community and make them aware of each other as we were working through things.
And for people that are concerned about, you know, maybe the academic rigor of it, which that I'm sure I could have found a better word, but you know, as you identified at the beginning, you recognize that your goal, especially for this first time you've ever met these kids, isn't about that academic rigor. It's about the safety, the security, the predictability, the joy. And so do you see how perhaps in the, like, if you had this same group of kids over time, do you feel like you'd be able to get to some of that higher order thinking stuff?
Oh my goodness, most definitely. Our second session was far different than our first one, right? So they had met each other. They were, you know, felt comfortable with me. I even got some drawn hearts. So like there's some love already. And so we were able to tackle, you know, more things. So we talked about feelings next, what that looked like, right? And expressing themselves. And so definitely a higher level, more cognitive activity happening in the second one. And I can't wait for the next session so we can dig even deeper.
That's super cool. I know we hadn't originally talked about that idea of, what do you think it would build into? But I'm glad you shared that with us.
Can I chime in with a parent question?
Yeah.
So, when my son was 4 and doing these Zoom calls, he was the quiet kid. He wanted to join, he wanted to listen. He joined every session, but he never made a peep. And I was okay with his level of engagement and sort of assumed that as he got more comfortable, he would chime in more. But do you have thoughts or strategies of what teachers can do if there's, in the classroom, there's the, quiet Johnny who is less engaged. But, I was thinking of my time teaching, but all of the strategies I would have had of use proximity, go over and, sit next to them, have them come on my lap, like none of the things that I would have thought of translate. And so do you have thoughts of how you can engage the less engaged?
I'll start with some simple things that I remember from the classroom. When I was reading stories to the kids, I might ask a question like referencing the picture. If you can see the bird in the picture, touch your nose. If you can see the little boy, pat your head. And so they're showing me their engagement and their involvement through those nonverbal interactions. And as Erin's pointing out also in the chat box, just because they're not talking doesn't mean they're not engaged. And so that, I think, I used to have this little guy who wouldn't come to circle time. He would kind of hang off in the periphery and just watch from over there. And one month we did this really cool activity where we let each kid have the camera for a day, the little digital camera. And when I looked at all of his photos afterwards, during circle time, he would be hiding over or sitting in the dramatic play area, looking at circle time, and he had framed it perfectly through the hole in the back of the chair. So he had isolated all of the visual distractions and was just focused on me, which was mind-blowing because the whole time I thought he was disengaged when really he was 100% engaged. So letting kids show that engagement in other ways that are nonverbal, because to tell you the truth, even for adults, sometimes it's a little scary to talk on the Zoom meeting. And I'm a horrible interrupter. I'm sure you guys have already noticed it. And that's one of my biggest things is like, oh. And so if you're a kid and you don't understand that give and take and you always feel like you're interrupting, that might be scary. You don't really know when it's your turn. So even having them like maybe draw pictures of what you guys just talked about and everybody hold up their picture rather than including that verbal piece all the time.
I love that.
What are your thoughts?
I was just thinking, I had a student who, I had them get something that made them feel comfortable, right? And that child kept that the whole time, right? So, but I also was looking for his cues for when he wanted to say something. And I would be like, oh my goodness, hold on. Talk to me. What were you wanting to say, right? So finding those moments and those cues in that child where they, whether it's the eyebrows going up or their body language shifting, and really latching onto those and giving them that opportunity. But everything else that you said was right? In these group activities and of these doing things, they're still engaged in doing, right? They just may not want to verbally express participation, but they participate in the dancing and the yoga and right, like all those other pieces that you're engaging them in.
And I think, Becky, this ties to what you were saying before of having shared expectations between the parents and teacher, of letting the parent know it's okay if they're on the call for 20 minutes and are really just listening and engaging by touching their nose, touching their head, and not speaking up, and making sure that the parents who might be watching or know that that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think that also, I mean, I don't know. I would imagine, Liz, you might be able to talk more about this, but I would imagine as a parent right now, it must be really unsure. I mean, you just don't really know what, and unless you've had the conversation, you don't know what the teachers want of you. And so you might be overshooting it or undershooting it. So,
yeah. I think it's a really interesting opportunity for parents to have more insight to what their children's education looks like and what they're engaged in and what school could be. But I also sort of assume that that's a new level of stress on the teachers. Like Marnetta, you were saying half the parents were on the call, half weren't. But if you were teaching that class, those 10 parents or whatever wouldn't have been there. And so it's a new level of interaction and potentially
distraction. Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's like you guys were saying, just having those expectations. So when the parents got on, this is what I need from you, right? I don't care that you're here, but this is what your role is, right? So, as long as everybody's on the same page and we're working together with a clear focus of why we're there, it'll be beautiful, regardless of what happens.
So I wanted to go over a few more strategies for teachers and then a couple things for admin and sneak in a few things for observers who,
yes.
Yeah. So a couple other things I just wanted to talk about for teacher tips would be to create a predictable routine, starting on your greeting and your departure. So although the middle stuff might change, the kids are kind of know what to expect when they first sit down. I'm going to be greeted in a certain way. It might be a specific song that I remember from last year, or maybe a new one, who knows. But that it's predictable, and that it almost creates a special ritual for you and the kids, as well as you said, Marnetta, that remembering why you're there. And that might involve should involve a conversation with teachers, admin, and parents, so that everybody has a similar set of expectations. When we were thinking about kind of administrator and coach tips, things like that, I think that big idea of why you're here has to come first.
Most
so
definitely.
Admin, coaches, they need to have that conversation with their teachers about, what do we want you to do in this 20 minutes? Do we want you to teach them their colors? Do we want you to teach them how to write their name? Or do we want you to ask open-ended questions to get them using language? Whatever it is, it needs to be established ahead of time.
Yes.
And it needs to be very developmentally appropriate, because we don't have all of the physical proximity stuff to help us along with those more difficult tasks. The other thing that I was thinking about for admin is that they want to be proactive with their teachers. So reaching out and making sure things are okay, and asking about successes and challenges, rather than waiting for teachers to come to them with a problem.
I want to even add having reasonable expectations, right? As because we know evaluations are going to happen. We know observations are going to be happening. We really need to make sure that those expectations are reasonable in the setting that, we're doing. So in a virtual setting, I may not be able to touch a child, but what does that connection look like, right? How do we celebrate, and how do I give verbal or physical affection, right? Air hugs, right? Air high fives, heart, all of those different pieces. So it's going to look differently. And yes, for those of you who are asking, there is guidance around that. Some of those pieces will be coming to you. Can't give you everything here, right? But we do have resources for you that are ready and coming.
So when I'm thinking about that administrator or coach role, thinking about and observer role, when you're thinking about those class assessments that are coming up or maybe coming up, one thing that I would encourage people to do is to really pay attention to the definition of the dimension and what it's looking for. So really easy example, positive climate, warmth, respect, and enjoyment communicated by verbal and nonverbal interactions, right? That's what we're looking for. And so as an admin, as a coach, as an observer, kind of keeping your focus on those big pictures and thinking about those strategies so what does warmth, respect, and enjoyment look like, sound like, and feel like in a Zoom meeting? And you gave some great examples of, air high fives, heart hands, just even while you were doing it, your tone of voice and your facial expression. One thing that I always think about as an observer, we talk about with that positive affect and teachers' enthusiasm. And one of the ways I describe that to observers is looking sometimes to see if the teacher is physically leaning in, right? And you can still do that in a Zoom meeting. You notice how I just leaned into the conversation, how I conveyed so much more enthusiasm with that? But the other thing is, it was a really exaggerated example, right? So I think sometimes with the teachers, with the admin, with coaches, is that we have to really think about what's working, what is effective for those kids. And so I clearly can't physically get in their close proximity, but can I still build relationships through other ways and show that warmth, respect, and enjoyment? And the answer is always yes.
Yeah.
So
I hate to do this.
I know
Cheryl just said, this is not enough time. We need a part 2. And I agree. And the good news is that there will sort of be a part 2. I'll share in just a moment. We do have another webinar coming up that we'll talk sort of more generically about interactions in every setting. But I know you guys took questions as they came in, but I wonder if, before I steal the screen back and share resources and other things people can find, do you have anything, last words of advice, last tips, last things you want to share?
I have a quick little thing. And it was just something I was thinking about last night. Find out how your kids already interact with meetings or technology. If they have weekly phone calls with grandma and grandpa through a video call, that might be an easier transition for that child than a child who either hasn't used technology because of either access or philosophy, or primarily uses technology for, kind of junk food type things, YouTube videos and silly games. So I think that would be I think that'd be important. Like I said, that just came to my mind last night, that a 4-year-old that has had a video conference with grandpa is going to really understand this a lot differently than that child that has only ever used their tablet to play some silly game.
And I want to say, first of all, you got this. Don't stress yourself out about it. Give yourself time to get acclimated. This is new for everyone, but don't underestimate those kids, right? Like in my second meeting, they were unmuting themselves. Like I could just say, do a request, and what you could just see them go. So what I was saying was, so I wouldn't underestimate the kiddos' ability to adjust to this situation either. So that's the only thing that I would say.
So be kind to yourself. Have
right?
Your expectations between the teacher, the admin, and the parents, and really know why you're there.
Yeah.
You guys are awesome. Okay, I'm going to share my screen to show, we'll send the slides out afterward, and so I'm going to go really quickly because I know we're short on time, but I want to show you that some of the tips and strategies that they mentioned are also in the slides. And so if you feel like you didn't want to miss anything, you wanted to write something down, they're all in here, and the slides will be available when we send out the recording tomorrow. And so you'll see a whole page of teacher tips and strategies and another page full of tips for coaches and administrators. And so you didn't miss anything. They're all in there. The other thing I wanted to share is that, like Cheryl said, we did not have enough time for this conversation. I think Renetta and Becky could have gone for another hour. So I want to let everyone know we do have another webinar coming up Wednesday, September 2nd at 1 p.m. I'm going to put in the chat right now the link to it, and so you can register now and join us for more of the conversation. The other thing I want to put in a pitch for is the class learning community. That's a great place to ask questions of other educators, of others. There are wonderful conversations happening in there right now about what are you doing about virtual learning? What are you doing about in-person learning where there's wearing masks and there's physical distancing? What are you doing about observing? And you can often find upcoming webinars and resources and videos in there. So there'll be a link to that on the resource page as well. There are there's just lots of resources, and all of this will be sent out via email. And so don't feel like you need to capture this all now, but I did share in the Q&A a couple of these. There are really nice printable, shareable PDF resources that give a lot more of specific guidance as an observer and as a teacher of what it might look like in a virtual setting, in an in-person setting, if the students are in person, but the observer needs to be remote, and so is doing video observations. And so you can find all of those on our website, and more guidance is coming. If you still have questions after reading these, please ask. We are trying to get through these as quickly as possible, and we know that we can't, we haven't answered everyone's questions yet, and so keep asking. And we do have a couple new solutions that are available on the website you can take a look into. We have a half-day online training that's alive with one of our class specialists, really talking about supporting interactions when a classroom is either socially distanced or physically distant, or a virtual online setting. And then we also have on-demand coaching services we can help you with if you need. I'm gonna try and click through all these. Okay, if you haven't taken a look at these, you can now find all of the trauma-informed webinars on demand available on the website. You'll see incredible subject matter experts. I watched them, or was part of all of them, and they were truly amazing. And the same experts that were in those free webinars dive a lot deeper and into the topic in our new trauma-informed online course that has 6 modules and really can walk teachers through some specifics. So take a look at that, and just keep clicking and say thank you. We know that you know, this is a challenging time for everyone, and appreciate all the work and care that you're putting into it. And don't hesitate to continue to reach out with those questions and with the support that you need. We will try our best to offer it. And as you're heading out, if any of those things I super quickly clicked through, you were like, ooh, I want to know more about that, please tell someone at TeachStone to reach out to me. There's a poll up now that just says, would you like to be contacted to learn more about some of those solutions? And so if you don't feel like clicking through the links I shared, we are happy to reach out to you and have that conversation. So go ahead and take that poll, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Marnetta, as I expected, that was truly enjoyable.
It was.